Welcome to the Wild Pitch Podcast.
Welcome, everybody. Another episode of the Wild Pitch Podcast. And today we have guest host Mike Gaffney again. You're going to be seeing a little bit more of him. So far, he's our top downloaded program, and we're going to use him for his good looks. And I don't know, he draws a crowd. So we're just using you, Mike. Thanks for coming on. Apparently, you know TJ.
Anything for you guys.
Yeah, I know. And today we have TJ Lopez from AMP, Athletic Movement Protocol. A lot of people in Long Island know who he is. I actually, TJ, haven't really met you. I've heard all about you from everybody. Everybody speaks really highly of you. And I know my brother Brian is really pumped because all he talks about with, we love developing kids in baseball. It's really annoying. All he talks about is how he wants to institute the strength portion to the summer programs and whatnot. He feels it's the most important thing. So I think we'll get into that a little bit. But TJ, thank you for coming on and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. I've been following since day one. I see what you guys are doing. I think it's great. I mean, the platforms that we have today are awesome. And I think you guys are just doing a great job just, with the education portion and just having the conversations for the young athletes to follow and see what the pros are doing, what they should be focusing on. And, that's where our passion is just at the end of the day, developing athletes. So
TJ, can you start off with, telling the audience a little bit about your background and, as an athlete and how you started AMP?
For sure. So, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I went to Marist College. I actually grew up in Franklin Square, went to Cary High School here on Long Island, and went on to play football at Marist. And while I was at Marist, I actually turned into a coach because I wound up getting hurt. I was probably, one of the guys that I probably maxed out my potential with what I had physically and what I had at my disposal when it came to, just development back in, the early 2000s. There really wasn't any kind of athletic development programs like there are today. There really weren't that many, training programs. I played basketball and football growing up. I actually played with Mike's brother, Scott, and we played, so I was a multi-sport athlete, but really that's all I focused on was playing the sport. So then when I went off to Marist, my main goal was to one day work with professional athletes and help them, whether it's, become more resilient so that they don't get injured, because I was an injured athlete. I played 2 years in college and 2 years I was a player coach because I just couldn't stay healthy. Tore my MCL in high school, tore my shoulder a few times in college. I had a rotator cuff injury that required surgery. I just decided not to get surgery and just start my coaching career in my junior year of college. And I was going to school for athletic training, which is on the sports medicine side of the performance spectrum. So, at the end of the day, my main goal was to not necessarily work on like the physical therapy side of things, but work on the preventative side of things while optimizing performance. And guys like me, that are pretty much maximizing their potential, I wanted to do just in a smarter way. And I felt that, I didn't necessarily reach my potential as an athlete, which I think most coaches are the athletes that don't necessarily, the best coaches at least, are the ones that don't necessarily maximize their potential as a player because, they maybe just didn't have those physical gifts, but they have the passion to help others. And that led me to, working with the likes of CC Sabathia. I was his personal trainer all the way through his career from about a year after he came to New York. So from 2010, preparing for the 2011 season was my first season with him. And I took him all the way through to the end of his career.
How did you link up with him?
So I was actually working at the time, the Yankee strength coach, a guy by the name of Dana Cavalier was the Yankee strength coach. I was working with him with a company called Major League Strength. And we actually had a partnership with Baseball Factory. I did a lot of work with them. I went around to all of their training camps in the summers and the winters, and like Cape Cod and down in Florida. So I linked up with CC when he needed a personal trainer in the off season, and it wound up, the first year was just training him in the off season. And the number one thing was the Yankees were like, hey, it was the first year he had knee surgery. He was, coming off of obviously a World Series, and I think did he get the Cy Young, or he was like second or third in the Cy Young, but he had big time knee surgery that offseason, and they attributed it mostly to the weight. So they gave him a number that he needed to come in to spring training with, and it was much lighter than they expected, than they actually thought he was. So we wound up having to lose about like 35, 40 pounds in the first offseason. And looking back on that, I think if anybody's followed his career, he didn't feel comfortable at that low weight.
Yeah, I remember him talking about that, right? He felt like he wasn't as strong, right?
Right. So the first year, he came in the offseason, the beginning of the offseason, he was pushing probably 340 at 6'7". So he's a big dude, but you see him in person, he actually doesn't, he's not as big and wide as people think he is. He's very athletic. He's actually like his lower body's like he built like a basketball player, and super flexible. Like he is as much of a freak athlete as you could categorize anybody as. If he was built to throw a baseball, if anybody was, he was built to throw a baseball. He's a big guy, 6'7", over 300 pounds, athletic and mobile as anybody. He's probably the most mobile athlete I've ever dealt with, which actually wound up being to his detriment when it came to injuries, because it was really hard for him to stabilize his knees and his shoulders over time. So our main concern was dropping the weight. And then obviously we were working on his knee strength, because that was the first year he had the arthroscopic surgery where they were like removing fragments. I saw pictures of Dr. Ahmad taking pictures of, what they removed from his knee. It was just crazy. Every offseason that I worked with him, every single offseason was started in, whether it was October or November, it was rehab from knee surgery. And the funny thing is, I talk to him about it all the time. Like we have to like write a book on like just the off-season chronicles of what we had dealt with over the 10-year span that I was working with him. He's a great guy. I became like pretty much a part of his family. There were times when I stayed at his house and we trained in the wintertime where I wouldn't be able to drive home because we got buried in snow. So I'd stay in his guest room, for a couple of days. So it turned into like more of a friendship than anything. And we went through a lot. Like, obviously everybody knows about his career, about, dealing with the addiction issues and the weight issues. But I think he's dealt with it as good as anybody could in stride. And, anybody that knows CC knows that he's the best clubhouse guy that you could ask for. He's just an all around great guy, family guy, and just loyal to the core. So, that's obviously the biggest client, and both literally and figuratively, that I've worked with. And, I attribute a lot of my success in this field to him trusting me as a young, 24-year-old strength coach, and committing to, what we did year after year. And I'd like to think that we helped elongate his career through those years. And, it's unbelievable when you think about how long it had been. It makes me old. Obviously I got a bald head now. Back then I had a lot more hair on the top of my head, but
yeah, but we all knew you were going bald.
Yeah. I had this.
What's he doing now? I need to get on that program.
Yeah, so it's funny. So the place that we trained at, so we originally started, when I first started working with him, we exclusively trained at his house and the Yankee Stadium. So I was one of the few people that was allowed, as a civilian, an outsider, allowed in the Yankee clubhouse in the off seasons, mainly because he was doing a lot of rehab with Steve Donahue, the athletic trainer, and the team doctor. So they always wanted me to be a part of the conversation, which I thought was just an awesome thing, that I was able to be a part of that process. And again, it allowed me to be around some of the best minds in sports medicine and strength and conditioning, and in baseball. I'll never take that back. I mean, it's unbelievable. I even, pinch myself sometimes to think about, what I was able to experience as a young strength coach in the field. It was literally my dream. I was living my dream, a couple of years out of college. And, so that's where we started. And then over time I was like, yeah, man, like we're getting strong, we're moving. We got to get out of your house. Like he had a great setup. He had, probably about a 700 or 800 square foot, like strength and conditioning area in his house. All the dumbbells, the Kaiser cable column, the treadmill, the bikes. And then he had a full court basketball court in his house. He lives in Alpine, New Jersey, in this huge mansion. It's just an awesome place. You get lost in it. He's got a full movie theater and everything. So he had everything that he needed in his house, but there were certain things that we really, that we didn't have. And early in my career, I actually worked in the same community in the next town over in Closter, New Jersey, where I started working in the first job in my career was for a company called Velocity Sports Performance. And I was a director at that Closter facility, which wound up closing down when right after I moved back to Long Island. So I knew the owner, and we wound up moving our training camps pretty much over to that gym. In that time, that gym moved to another location, and it's called Impact Zone. So we had been training there for probably the last 4 years. So now the owner's name is Dave Palladino, and he's been training CC now more bodybuilding / weight loss style for the last 6 or 8 months. And CC, when CC commits to something, he goes all in. So he committed to the diet, he committed to the training during quarantine. He's got an addictive personality. So he just we all in on fitness, nutrition, and training, which is a great thing to become addicted to. So, it's something that, we were talking about it his whole career. We were, saying, once you're done, he kind of treated himself or kind of looked at himself as an offensive lineman. And he pretty much said, I feel good at 300 to 310 pounds. That's where I want to pitch. At 1 year, we started off spring training at 278, and he lost an additional 10 pounds in Tampa. So he started the season at 268, and he just didn't feel right. And if you guys remember that, it was all over the papers. It was probably the third year I worked with him. He was really slim, and he did well, but he did struggle with just velocity. And then we brought him back up, gradually brought him back up to in the 300 range, and he felt a lot more comfortable there. And it had a combination of obviously the fluctuation in weight, but I really think, he had the most innings out of any pitcher over the previous 6-year span. So 200 plus innings, that's just it's just going to add up on your body, and the wear and tear, especially on that plant leg, was probably a part of that issue as well. That people just try to attribute 100% of it to the weight loss. I think maybe it had something, maybe 25 or 50%, but not 100%. But the long story short, that's pretty much it. There's been a lot of ups and downs in that time, but every off season we pretty much had a plan to stick to, and we had a lot of barriers to get him going, and he started the season on time. I think it was 9 out of 10 years I worked with him. I think there was 1 year he might have started a little bit late because of, I think, a toe injury or something. There was so many that I can't even remember. But it was every year I was like, there's no way you're going to start. There's no way you're going to start in spring training. You're going to get on the mound in the beginning of the season. Every single year he proved everybody wrong, and he got out there and just, he reinvented himself later in his career. And I was shocked. I was as close to the situation as you possibly could. And he proved me wrong just about every year, the last 4 to 5 years of his career.
Well, he's just a complete warrior, right? I mean, he's just a competitor when you think about, his career and the things that he's done. I mean, even when he got that 1 year when he got traded from Cleveland all the way, to Milwaukee during that run, and he was pitching on 2 or 3 days rest, it was just, it's insane.
To his own detriment. He had no regard for his own body.
Right. So he was kind of abusing himself. Sure. And that catches up to you over time. Right. I mean, it's funny because obviously his career is storied. I played against him. I think it might have been his first year when he was in Mahoning Valley, when he was in short season A.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. He was a big kid, obviously back then, throwing the shit out of the ball. But, it was just, you watch him and as he developed in the big leagues, and it was, he was just something special when it came to competing, and then you talk about his career here, and like you said, he did have to reinvent himself a little bit, but outside of just maybe the one personal issue that kind of got out in the public, and like you said, he faced that up, he faced that like a man, and just kind of worried, and it seemed like he was fully aware of what he needed to do to try to get himself back on track. Him better than us, but from a public perspective, that's at least what it looked like to us on the outside.
Well, first and foremost, he's a family man, and he wanted to be an example. He's got 4 children. He's been married to his high school sweetheart. His whole, so he's got a huge family in Vallejo, California. He's an example for. He's got his foundation that works with inner city youth. He wants to be an example and he got out in front of it, and he knew that it was going to get out or whatever was going to happen. He just figured, you know what, like, I'm just going to, face it and get out in front of it before, people start reporting on this thing and misconstrue what really happened. And, he became the face of, what that looks like and how you can overcome it. And I can tell you, he has not touched alcohol since that day. I have been around him. I know his family. I know all of his friends. Like, he has been 100%. He's not touched it. And that's, that says something. That
sure does.
With the stress. I mean, the biggest thing that I recognized from his career, obviously biggest contract in baseball at the time, at least for a pitcher, on the biggest stage, World Series. I mean, the pressure, first and foremost, in the media, that's one thing. But then when you also put in the travel that these professional athletes go through, when they're in Seattle and they got 3 or 4 games in Seattle, and then they're flying back to New York. I mean, the time change alone, you can never get on a good sleep schedule. You're up at midnight Eastern time playing, and then you don't get back to the hotel until, really 3 a.m. New York time. And then, everybody, you go out to dinner or something like that. It's like that. Those are the things that people don't really get about, the lifestyle. When I would travel with them, and early in my career, I had the flexibility of traveling with them, and mostly on the East Coast. I usually didn't go on the West Coast, but they get back after a game and we'd stay up until 3 a.m. I'm like, guys, how do you do this every day? They're like, well, they just came back from Seattle. So like they were already shifted with the time change. And it's just unhealthy, when these professional athletes operating at such a high level. Everybody has their vices on how they calm themselves down and deal through with injuries and pain. So all of these things, all the barriers and kind of roadblocks that he came up with in his career, when you put everything into perspective, it's amazing that more guys are not, outed or whatever, in that way. But yeah, it's, being close to this situation, you appreciate the resilience of these guys, the ability to bounce back, the consistency. That's really what separates a professional athlete from a really, really good athlete. An all-star college athlete from a pro athlete. It's they probably on their best day are about the same, but it's who can be consistent. And that's some of it's mental. Most of it for CC was mental. He just had that disregard for his own body. And obviously he had the natural talent. And then on top of it, we worked our asses off as much as we possibly could to keep him durable, in the off season, getting him ready and then maintaining throughout the year.
TJ, I want to ask you about that. So you train, you had CC and, quite a few other elite athletes, Tobias Harris, Justin Dunn. What separates these guys? What message can we send to the kids out there that –
I love this question.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of things, and one of the biggest pieces of the pie is genetics. At the end of the day, you're blessed with a certain set of genetics. You're blessed with height. Tobias Harris wouldn't be in the NBA, if he was 5'3". He just so happened to be 6'10", or 8. Same with CC. So Justin Dunn, on the other hand, is more of like a normal guy. He's 6'2". He grew, but when I first started working with Justin, he was in, I think, 9th grade going into the gunnery school. I was working up in Westchester for the company Major League Strength, and Justin's dad found us because we were the Yankee strength coach, owned the business, and he wanted to find the best of the best. So I started working with Justin when he was in 10th grade, and it was actually, I did virtual training with him. If you would have told me Justin Dunn was going to be throwing 98 miles an hour in the major leagues, I would have told you, no way in a million years is this kid gonna grow and develop into that. I mean, another guy that's just proved me wrong, which I love to get proved wrong. But so genetics has a huge part, right? If there was a pie chart, it might be at least a third of it is genetics. So at least we got another 2/3, right? A big chunk of that is mindset. So when it comes to competition, when it comes to trust in your own ability, when it comes to dealing with distractions and knowing what you need to do. One thing that CC, he just knew what he was capable of, and he knew what he needed to focus on. He didn't focus on any of the BS. It was only, this is what I need to do to succeed, and I don't care about anything else. Strategies and things, you know, he didn't want to get distracted. Go ahead.
Let me stop you there really quick. So, because you obviously, outside of, you know, these high profile athletes that you've worked with, right, and that are competing at the highest levels on the planet Earth, you also work with a lot of young athletes as well, who aspiring athletes, young aspiring athletes, right? And I'm sure some of those range anywhere from, you know, let's call it high school through college, you know, level. And you talked about something about, you know, you're elaborating on something about the mindset and how these guys all carry themselves in very similar ways, right? With the mental state that they all kind of, you know, they all are locked into.
Right.
I'm sure, you know, not criticizing any of your clientele, but I'm sure you can look at some of your clientele and you can say, you know what, I don't know, he's not there mentally. And it doesn't surprise you when they're not successful in the field.
So we talk about at AMP, we've got the 3 C's of a successful athlete, right? So when any athlete that comes to the door, we evaluate them first. So the first part of my evaluation is mental, right? Is when I shake the athlete's hand, does he look me in the eye? When I speak to him, does he answer, or does mom or dad answer? You know, is he enthusiastic? Is he slouched in his chair, or is he sitting forward? That is such a huge part. I know right away whether he's got God-given talent and a kid that, you know, is going to be successful because of that, or if it's a kid that isn't making his high school team, but he's so into the process that I know he's going to develop into a better athlete. I know that right away. So, you know, mindset and the mental aspect is so huge. So the 3 C's that we talk about is, first, you're committed. So I need to know that you come into the door, you don't have to have like the best idea of what your specific goal is. But if you don't have if you're not committed to something, like I want to make, you know, my high school team, I want to get into college, I want to get drafted. You have to be committed to a specific goal first and foremost, right? So commitment's number 1. Number 2 is that you're coachable, right? So the first thing on coachable, if you're not looking me in the eye and you're not, you know, just responsive in our conversation, then I know right then and there, it's going to be a difficult process to kind of like get the most out of you. If they're buried in their phone, if they're not present in that time. And, you know, it's about 50-50 with the athletes that we see. Sometimes
and it's generational, right, too, because our guys are so today's athlete is attention span is a lot shorter, probably.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I would imagine that at a majority or at least a portion of the clients that we first meet, the longest time they spend that week not looking at a screen is probably the hour that they spend with me in that evaluation.
Right.
And it's not like I'm grilling them, and obviously I'm not trying to make it a combative or intimidating scenario, but I'm going to kind of challenge the athlete, especially, you know, high school. We mostly deal with high school and college athletes. And if dad's answering all the questions, I start to, you know, really just hone in on the kid and say, you know, I'm asking you, I appreciate it, Mr. Smith, but I'm asking your son, I want to hear it from him.
Sure.
And I do want the feedback from the parent, but I don't want the parent to speak for the athlete. So, you know, being coachable, we all talk about that. We all know what that means, but it's kind of like not a tangible thing. But for me, it's presence, and it's being a part of the process, wanting to learn and coming in with an open mind as being a part of the process, instead of, you know, either turned off and saying, I know it all. There are some clients that come in the door, they think they know everything. But then there's others that really aren't that into it. So it's like, I don't know, I just want to play the sport. So that's number 2 is coachable. And then the last one is probably the biggest one, we talked about it already, is consistency. So like anything, you can be great once. You can be, you can say, you know, so consistency, actually talk about it in 2 different ways. So it comes with like your day-to-day, right? How consistent are you with your training, your nutrition? How much sleep are you getting? You know, how much effort are you bringing every single day? Are you focused? That's consistency, day to day, week to week, building the you know, part of the process. But also consistency of your words with your actions. So I have plenty of athletes come in the door and they're like, I want to go to the pros. I want to get drafted. I want to go to Clemson. I want to go to UCLA. And I say, okay, that's great. But your words are one thing. Your actions need to be consistent with those words. So, you know, and that's something I can't necessarily tell day one. Maybe I can be like, this kid, you know, he's 5'1", 160 pounds. He's not going to Clemson. But there again, kids have surprised me. The growth spurts and just like committing to the process, kids getting bigger and stronger, those things happen. But I want to make sure that it's not just something that they say and it's something that they actually do. So we've kind of turned these 3 words into kind of like a mantra or a set of core values for our athletes and our staff. As coaches, we need to understand these things and kind of continually drill them in. And, just kind of like have our kind of blocks and our rocks that we stick to and remind our athletes that, these are the 3 things. They have almost nothing to do. It's all about effort, consistency, showing up. It has nothing to do with athletic ability. It has nothing to do with talent. It has everything to do with your process and your mindset, right? So that's really, again, why.
And that's simplifying, excuse me. The formula almost, right? Here it is. This is the formula. Let's make it this simple.
Yes. And that's, at the end of the day, that's, it's a way of communication. It's marketing. It's what I'm marketing, what I'm selling is buy-in from the athlete to the process. So if I make it so complicated that it's a 14-step process and you got to learn this, that, and the other thing, you got to be perfect here, there, and everywhere. You got to eat this way. You got to sleep this much. You got to train this way. If I do that, you lose people.
All right.
Even the best. You have to be able to communicate clearly and concisely and make it simple, just like you said, and then stick to the basics. The biggest thing in my entire career, there's been so many different fads. There's been so many different certifications and so many different classes and pieces of equipment and this, that, and the other thing. You have to keep it simple because if it's not sustainable, it's not going to be something that's actually going to create change and improve an athlete, whether you're at the top of competition or you're a kid that's in 9th grade just trying to make his JV team.
Right.
You have to be consistent and if you're doing a different program and a different workout every single day you walk into the gym, you're not getting better. You have to have, there's a systematic approach that has been tried and true for at least 30, 40 years in strength and conditioning.
Okay. As you're saying that, I want to pivot a little bit, right? Because I mean, you could probably recall back to this time, obviously being a football guy as well. Like when Jim, myself, Gaff, probably Brian, when we were all quote unquote training for our seasons or as athletes or as professionals, there wasn't this sport specific approach that you see nowadays, right? So we get that there's maybe a different roadmap than there was in the past, where it was just you broke it down to 3 different categories on your workout days, whereas back and buys, chest and tries, legs and shoulders, right? So and mixed in your abs or whatever. But ironically, and tell me where either me as a guy who was not maybe in that era of the sport specific training, and maybe I'm seeing it wrong. Maybe something's getting heightened than it really is. But like, for instance, I feel like there's a lot more injuries today, even with the sport specific training. Jim, you agree with that at all?
Yeah, but on the flip side, thinking back to when we were working out, I was always hurt as well because I was trying to get my little body to be a big man. So I think there was, but the pitching, 100%, and Brian could speak to it. Pitchers are always hurt now. And I attribute it to weightlifting, and I don't know anything about it, but it has to be a little bit. But it's a necessary evil.
The one thing you see about hitters, for instance, is the oblique. Why are guys swinging and all of a sudden have oblique issues, and then it takes them 2 months before they can get back on the field?
Yeah, and Chris, to your point, I was going to say, and it's not even at the youth and collegiate level. You're even seeing professionally guys.
That's really what I'm referring to. I'm talking about at the high level. The guys that they're getting nicked up or banged up, and then they're on the shelf. Now, I know some of it is because of the investment, so they want to make sure to take time to make sure these guys are actually 100% healthy before they get back on the field. Mm-hmm. So I know that sometimes delays maybe the recovery time or delays when they get back into action. But educate me. So educate me as somebody who thinks, with all the sports specific stuff, I don't understand why we see certain injuries that and maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it's not as bad as I think it is, but it's just newer to me. So
here's the way I look at this. And this is this is an unbelievable topic because, I think it's something that needs to be solved. I think it is a problem in sports, and it is a problem in strength and conditioning and sports medicine that I think there's a lot of finger pointing. There's definitely a lot of finger pointing in industries. Oh, these guys are getting hurt. It's the strength coach's fault. It's the athletic trainer's fault. It's the team doctor's fault. It's the athlete's fault because he's not preparing himself. It's this, it's that. It's there. You can point fingers all day, every day. I think here's one thing just to consider. We are seeing higher exit velocities, higher throwing velocities year after year. There's a new guy that throws 105 miles an hour on every roster in every farm system every single year. So those numbers are, there's going to have to be a limit. There's going to have to, are we going to see 110 miles an hour out of an arm? I don't know.
Brian, are we?
We are absolutely, I think we're tapping, we're maxing out the engine. We've got maybe
Right.
110 on the dash,
Right.
and we're just
Yeah.
revving that engine to the end. And we're asking bodies, athletes to go all out and maximize everything at all times. So if you think about you're driving a Ferrari, and if that Ferrari can drive 300 miles an hour and you just floored it every time you took it out, that engine's going to blow faster than if you drove it 200 miles an hour.
Right.
So just because you can throw 100 miles an hour doesn't mean you should throw 100 miles an hour, because you can't control it.
I love that you're saying that right now.
So, and this is a huge thing. Like we work with, we do the driveline program. We do the weighted ball program. We've been doing it for years. But my first thing that I explain to everybody, I say, I am going to build your engine, right? We're going to fix your engine. We're going to build it to put more horsepower in it. But that does not mean you need to redline every single day. If you can throw 100, that means you could probably control 90, right? So therefore, if you can throw 80, you could probably control about 72 or 75 with good form, right? So if my maximum deadlift is 400 pounds, is that going to look pretty? Is it going to be a perfect form deadlift? Probably not, right? So I could probably do 300 pounds for 10 reps with perfect form.
But with that being said, sometimes you got to open up the engine, right? Because of sports car,
you absolutely do. I think we're asking our athletes to do too much, and I think that the radar gun is an enemy to the pitcher. And analytics and building up your body, and now then that comes to, okay, how did we get to this point? How all of a sudden from 1980 to 2020 are we all of a sudden everybody throws 95? Just about everybody on the roster throws 95. Back in the 80s and 90s, probably half the roster, or maybe a quarter.
right? So the average velocity, Brian, you probably know this better than I do. I mean, when we played, the average velocity, big league velocity was 90, 91 miles an hour. That was average big league velocity. Today it's probably closer to 93, 94, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly.
So we've built up these engines, and we've created these beasts, right? These monsters that are, what do they need to do that? They need to build up their body in the off season. They need to strength train. They need to eat right. They need to do all of those things to build up their body. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a healthy thing. That doesn't mean that their tendons can withstand that force, their ligaments, their muscles. So when we talk about sports specific, I think that there's a lot of misconstruing of what that means. So there's some people that take it so literally that they'll put like a weight vest on and put weights around their wrists and throw a baseball or swing a bat. I don't necessarily agree with that. What I look at as sports specific is we're training movements, not muscle groups, right? So like you said, like you used to do back and bis, chest and tries, like that was like the bodybuilder, 1980, 1990, like rip it out of Muscle and Fitness and bring it to the gym. Like that's what everybody used to do, right? So that was building the muscle. It's really more for physique and for muscle strength, but not for athletic performance. So our tagline is train like an athlete. And because in my career, I saw so many athletes either train like bodybuilders, power lifters, CrossFitters, runners, or just general like fitness. They were filling the training bucket with things that were not really transitioning to their sport. So what I mean by that is, like, everybody knows about Noah Syndergaard and the year that he put on about 25 pounds in the off season. And he did that by powerlifting. So he went to this hardcore powerlifting gym. I don't remember where exactly it was, but all he focused on was building 30 pounds of mass. In that time, I don't think he was doing a lot of rotational work or a lot of rotator cuff work or a lot of throwing work. He just really focused. He put all of his time and effort into building.
So he wasn't counterbalancing what it was that he was doing to account
Right.
for some of
So
his
he
actual.
wasn't being specific to the demands of the sport. So there's something in strength and conditioning called the SAID principle. It's a specific adaptation to an imposed demand. So when you train your body, you're stressing your body, and you want it to respond to the demand so that it's specific to your sport, right? So if I want you to swing a bat harder or throw harder, that's a rotational movement. So if you're not training rotation with med ball throws, with band exercises, with cable exercises rotationally, if you're not doing that in the weight room and you're not improving your mobility, your hip and shoulder separation, then you're not being specific to your sport. If you're building strength, but it's only in what's called the sagittal plane. So if I do like a squat, is more of like in the frontal plane. If I do a deadlift, is more of a sagittal plane, meaning I'm kind of like moving in one plane of movement. So if I were to sprint straight ahead, if I'm a sprinter, all I need is exercises that I'm going forward and back, right? So I'm squatting, I'm deadlifting. But if I'm swinging a bat and I'm throwing a baseball, I need to be able to separate my hips and shoulders and create power and force in that plane. So the best strength coach in the game right now, Eric Cressy, has always been talking about power is plane specific. So if you're trying to improve your swing, if you're trying to improve your velocity, you need to train the rotational plane, right? So that gets lost in the programming, right? The lateral, the horizontal plane, the frontal plane. Those are things that we're not training enough of. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think a lot of guys devote their off seasons to lifting as much possible weight because they want to post that stuff on Instagram and show everybody that they can deadlift 500 pounds. And they do it with horrible form.
Jimmy, you hate the deadlift, don't you?
Oh my God.
Hate it.
You got to hear this guy when he watches our guys do deadlifting. He goes off.
So here's the thing. We deadlift. And if you guys will ever see a rounded back, cranked neck, rounded shoulder deadlift on my feed, you can call me and rip me apart and tell everybody I'm the worst strength coach in the world, because it just doesn't happen. We won't let it happen. It's all about form. The deadlift is one of the best exercises if applied properly with good form. It's one of the best exercises that transitions to power and speed and overall body strength. But if you misapply it, and I think that this is getting to your exact situation and your exact concern, is that strength and conditioning has become such a big part of baseball, but injuries are either the same or getting worse. So what's going on? I think we're filling the bucket too much with these power lifts and these heavy exercises and heavy lifts that at the end of the day, it's ego lifting. It's if I'm dealing with a $30 million athlete, my number one goal is to keep them healthy.
So that's interesting that you say that, right, TJ? Because I'm sure that's also your goal for the young athlete that you have, is to make sure he's healthy and functional, right? You want to make sure that he can go out there and he can utilize the gains that he's making in your facility and translate them onto the baseball field. And sometimes that means not going the full distance with some of the, like you said, not going at 300 miles an hour all the time, and
Right.
That's probably a hard battle because maybe you have a counterpart in the industry who sells it another way, and that kind of, and that's a little, sexier, right? To the I guess the layman person.
Absolutely. And, we treat everybody like a $30 million athlete. So in the way, in when it comes to keeping them safe, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth it to try and maximize this kid's squat with a bar on his back when his form isn't great? And, but we got to go ass to grass, and we got to, lift as heavy as possible. Because that's what you're seeing in colleges. You're seeing that in other facilities. You're seeing that, these professional athletes that are paying these guys tens of thousands of dollars a year to be their personal trainer, and they're doing the worst exercises you could possibly do. You're putting your athletes in danger, right?
Right.
The exercise. So the one thing that I've said from day one, it doesn't matter about the exercise. It's all about the execution of the movement, right? So if you tell me you ask me if our deadlift's good for baseball players. In anything, it's all about context, and it all depends. So the answer is, what's the quality of movement? How consistent are you doing it? Are you moving properly at your hips? Is your core stable? Are your shoulders in the right position? Are you stressing your lower back, or are you actually using your hips and hamstrings? Is this something you're doing, weekly, or you're doing it too often? So there's all these, obviously the context is key in that case, but there is no wrong exercise. There's no bad exercise. There's just misapplied programming. And like, that's, I think, the biggest concept that I've kind of come to in my career is that there are no absolutes, but there is a lot of garbage out there, because it's just, you're taking this thing and you're misapplying it. You're putting the emphasis, because strength coaches, we all have our own egos, just like any athlete, right? We're all former athletes. We're all washed up. So we want to show how much, our athletes are doing in the gym, and how hard they're working, and how strong they are.
Because it reflects on you.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if I wrapped my ego to the deadlift of my athletes, then that's my fault, because now I'm putting my athletes in harm's way, because they're not power lifters.
Right.
They're baseball players, right? We've got one of the strongest athletes on Long Island. We actually have a few, but this kid, Sean Lane, he's at St. Dom's.
We're familiar with him. We actually had him at the high school level a few years ago.
Awesome. So he's going to Maryland. He originally committed to Notre Dame. This kid lifts the house. I mean, we almost don't have enough weight on the bar for him at times, but he's got perfect form. I'm not going to allow him to lift the weight. If at the minute that his low back rounds, that means I waited too long to stop him from the next rep. So I teach my athletes, I teach every one of my coaches, the first thing that we see, this first sign of fatigue during a heavy lift, it's like an alarm goes off. Drop it. Drop the weight. Don't even think about it. It's not worth it. Grinding out a deadlift or a squat or a bench press or you name it, exercise, let alone all those crazy things on Bosu balls and stability balls, like balancing with a bar on their back. There's stupid stuff that goes on every day, but it's the things that happen daily that the coaches without that keen eye, that only have their ego lifted to the bar going off the ground into the air, and they don't care about the quality of the movement. Those repetitions make worse athletes on the field. They're not making you better. And you could obviously tell I have a lot of passion behind this, because I see it too much. And we have so many athletes that either start with us and then they go to college, or they've come from other places. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, first of all, no athlete touches a barbell within the first month of training with us. A barbell does not get touched in the first month, no matter.
You're like the Mr. Miyagi of this whole.
Yes. So you need to learn how to move first. Your body. You need to learn how to. It's a movement. It's not a lift. It's not an exercise. It's a movement. So the deadlift is a hinge, right? So athletic position is a hinge position, right? If I'm going to sprint, if I'm going to change direction, if I'm in the field, I'm in that position. So it's a very sport specific position. I'm challenging athletic positions when we move. And another thing that we talk about to my staff and to our athletes, the question is, does it look athletic? So if you ask me about an exercise, my question to you is, does it look athletic? If you were going to do like a seated leg extension, right, machine, it probably doesn't look very athletic. You're sitting down, you're just extending one joint. That's like an old school bodybuilding movement. I'm not saying that that's a bad exercise. I'm just saying it's not really going to build athleticism. So, but a squat or a deadlift or a lunge or a push-up, those are all athletic positions. I can take those positions and pause them at any point, and you're probably going to do something similar on the field, right? And then you take that one step further, and if they're doing that movement, and if I pause it and their back is rounded, their shoulders are down, they're like a slumped, like melted candle, then they're most likely not doing that movement efficiently, and it doesn't look athletic. So therefore,
and it gives you information, right, on how to maybe address the deficiencies.
Right. So first and foremost, as a coach, we need to point out that we need to notice the form is breaking down. So like my young coaches, our interns, the first thing that they're pretty much tasked to do is to find bad form, hunt it out, and tell one of the coaches that they found bad form. They don't necessarily possess the ability to correct it yet. They may not know exactly what's going wrong, so they might not be able to cue and fix it as quickly as one of my seasoned coaches would. So their job is to just notice it and name it and say, hey, that push-up doesn't look right. Anybody that walks in the gym can probably point out a bad rep. So it's the coach's job, the expert's job, to then take that one step further and either fix it during that set or stop it altogether and change it. Either regress the exercise or progress it if it's not hard enough. But like I said, we're training movements first. So if you're going to deadlift, the first thing you're going to do is we're going to put a dowel on your back, and we're going to teach you how to hinge, to use your glutes and hamstrings and keep your spine in a neutral position and sit into your hips.
Right.
That is, if any athlete that walks in the door, I've got professional athletes, I've got kids that barely make the JV team. It doesn't matter how good you are. Movement patterns, there are some of the best athletes have the worst movement. Some of the worst athletes have the best movement. So
TJ, can you talk a little bit, because the perception out there, and we deal with kids ranging from 9 to 18. Mm-hmm. But the perception with most of our parents is that strength training early on stunts their growth. We have parents that come up.
That's funny, because I wanted to know at what age what's the appropriate age per se.
I think that'd be important for our viewers just to hear.
I would absolutely say, so that's for the most part, the way that people take that, I would say, is false. It's a false belief, because when you look at, think about the people you grew up with, right? The shorter guys are usually the more muscular, and they have shorter distance between their limbs, so they're able to build more muscle.
They can bench more, those guys, right?
They can bench more, they can deadlift more. I've got short arms.
That's my excuse. I have long arms.
So
I'm gonna show this to one of my. I'm sorry, I gotta show that to one of my buddies who's he thinks he's the strongest guy on earth, but meanwhile he's only 5'4". So
right. So it's one of those things. It's kind of like correlation does not equal causation. If you're short, it doesn't mean that you started lifting early on. It's just that you're bulkier because you're shorter, right? So the muscle mass that you build makes you wider, right? At the end of the day. So I think that's one of the things that people kind of like. It's a false equation there, but there definitely is. There are people that apply strength training way too early, especially lifting weights, way too early in the process. We have pretty much a baseline of, we have an evaluation. So we have a movement evaluation that determines not necessarily, age, but more like development age. So we might have a 12-year-old that their body showed they're like super mobile, really flexible, no stability, no control of their joints. So they might have the development age of like a 9-year-old. And this is a concept from TPI, it's Titleist Performance. They've come up with this concept of like early training and it's long-term athletic development. So if you just go by age, you're going to miss a whole lot, especially early on in the process. Between like the ages of like 7 and 11, there's a whole lot of, there are kids that develop really quickly. There's kids that develop very slowly. There's tall athletes that you got to deal with certain things. Short athletes are usually the more athletic when they're younger. But what you want to make sure you're doing is you're assessing each situation so that, you're individualizing the approach a little bit. But yeah, as a rule of thumb, we don't lift weights before the age of like 13, 14 is usually where we're going to start to at least introduce. And this is, again, if a professional athlete's walking through my door and they're not touching a barbell, you know that a 9-year-old's not touching a barbell for a couple of years. Only maybe a dowel or something very light to teach them as a teaching tool. Because at the end of the day, they're carrying around, 40-pound backpacks when they go to school. So they can hold something, but it's maybe a 15-pound weight or a kettlebell, maybe do like a farmer carry of some sort. But it is, we absolutely have to address that concern. I think in some ways it's misconstrued, but you do want to wait until they're at a certain level of development when it comes to at least the stability of their joints and their ability to recover from strength training. Because if you train everybody like they're an adult, like they're just a mini adult, you're going to run into problems. And it's more on the tendon and the ligament issues early on, because you're building up, you're trying at least to build an engine that can't withhold that stress. And
that's probably what happened to you, Jim. You just weren't physically ready to do all that stuff that you started doing.
No, we can get into that. But Gaff, I know you probably have to sneak out, but I want to hear your thoughts before you go.
I got like 50 minutes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to though talk to you about, you going through, you've been the longest coach tenured. How has it evolved over the years, and what are you seeing at Division I level with the strength training and how it pertains to you?
So when I was the head coach at the D2 level, I actually had TJ come down a couple of times and do the evaluations with our guys, and it just became, it was actually really good for me to just see, just while he was evaluating movements, I was evaluating personnel a little bit also, whether they were buying into what he was doing and how they were doing within those evaluations. Some kids I thought were more athletic than they were, and then I saw them do some of the things that TJ asked them, and vice versa. The kid who I didn't think was athletic is now moving in a lot better fashion. But the challenge we had at that level, TJ would say, is like, I would love to write up a specific program for each guy if I could. Mm-hmm. He's like, because that's what's necessary for kids who are 18.
But it's tough to at the collegiate level.
Yeah, and that's what
to implement it is challenging.
And so then I think I had you, TJ, if you remember correctly, I think I made you did a position player thing and a pitcher's working out for me. So it was kind of a broad, that was the best we could do with our circumstance. But to take it a step further, because I didn't learn form or how to lift till I was a professional baseball player. Mm-hmm. All right. That was like our generation. And I know Brian was trying to teach me like when I was in college.
Brian was lifting, he was doing curls for the girls back then.
Brian
I didn't know what I was doing.
Well, compared to me, you knew what you were doing. But a lot of it probably had to do with Jimmy playing professional baseball too. So I'm able to go back into the weight room and walk around and be able to see if a guy's, doing a straight leg deadlift wrong. If I'm seeing an arch, I'm able to see that. But when I have 25 guys in a weight room, I'm sure there's stuff I'm missing as well. So that challenge of form and look, I mean, I've been coaching now for 7 years. That first year, that was a different generation than this player, so because they didn't have the TJ Lopez's, of the world like around it and accessible. So their form wasn't that good. So I think you're seeing, it's interesting now. You're bringing kids in and you're introducing this more baseball specific program, weightlifting program, and you get a little backlash because kids are coming from playing football in high school and it's all about just getting big.
Right.
So you get some kickback there. And now at the Division I level, we have our own strength coach. So he's actually going around. So you're a little more comfortable with the form and all that, and them being schooled. And the kids now are a little more schooled in what the proper form and stuff. So it's a little different just in that short period of time. But yeah, I think it's fascinating because you still have these guys, and we talk about the sports specific stuff. I'm looking for athletes. I always want athletes. And that's what I love talking to TJ about, because I want a kid who can move athletically. I don't want this big physical, look, even guys I coach with, they want physical kids. And like, I'm like, yeah, I want physical, but I want athletic. I want them to move. I want them to be fluid. I don't want.
So let's talk about that really quick, Gaff, because that's a great point. And I know Jim and Brian can attest to, I guess, a situation when we were having kids evaluated in certain actions. What was it, like the 5-10-5 and what else was it?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, Chris. We had a tryout for our summer organization maybe 5-6 years ago. And one of the stations, because it was indoors, was we did the 5-10-5, and Brian, we did something else. We had a strength coach in the facility. And after the workout, he gave us a list. He goes, here's the top 10 players here, I bet. And TJ would know, he does the same thing.
Right. And, so what's the correlation there, right?
Well, so the bottom line is we come up with our top 10 players in the thing, and he was like 9 for 10, just based on if we sent them to that athletic movement protocol in the back, which is exactly what it was.
Right.
We could have picked our team.
Mm-hmm.
And that speaks to you too, Mike, what you're saying.
Yeah, athlete, absolutely.
Right.
That's a question. Does it look athletic? And the guys that make it look effortless in the weight room are usually the ones that make it effortless on the field.
But is there testing that you see and that you do and you say, you know what, this kid's got something? I mean, yes. forget the eyeball test, because that
here's a guy. I'll tell you a specific scenario. Chris Kappas. He's at Pittsburgh.
Yep, Kellenberg kid.
Yeah, we coached against him.
One of Mike's fellow alum.
Yes. So I evaluated him when I first started my business in 2013, right? So we're going back 7 years. Wow. So I think he was going into like 9th or 10th grade at the time. And he was just like little unassuming kid, skinny kid.
Small, yeah.
Great family, meet the kid. He's very quiet, but very, very, respectable kid. And I put him through our evaluation. So I do pretty much like a 3-point physical evaluation. I told you about like the mental side, which I've honed over the years, but we do a postural analysis, which is really just like static. I look at them in 2 different ways, look at their joints, where they are. So this kid, like perfect posture, right? So that's check that box. Then I do a functional movement screen with the FMS. And that's what with Mike and CW Post, that's what we went through portions of that evaluation. It's a squat, an inline lunge, balance, core stability, and shoulder stability, as well as flexibility. He pretty much aced that. He got it's out of 21. It's 7 movements. You can get 1, 2, or 3 on each. He, I think, got a 20 out of 21. He was one of the best. And you're normally like the average is around 15 out of 21. And that means that for the most part, you're going to be a healthy athlete. So he just everything was perfect. Okay. Then I took him through a performance evaluation, and that's it's a broad jump. It's a sprint, a vertical jump, a lateral bound, and we do med ball throw. And he just I looked at his dad, and I actually made the comparison because I worked with Mariano Rivera's son, Mariano Jr. And I was around the Yankees a lot. So I was with, in the clubhouse when Mariano was there, and the kid just reminded me of that body type. He was long arms, just super athletic. And I told his dad right there, I said, I don't want to blow up your head or anything. This kid's in 9th grade. Who knows? I said, this is Mariano Rivera. And when I worked with Mariano Jr. around that age, he looked exactly like that. And I said, this kid's got more potential than any of my athletes that I'm working with, including my professionals. And lo and behold, he put the work in. He worked his ass off every year. He was the #1 broad jump. When he went to Pittsburgh, he texted me. I still have a screenshot of the text message. He was the #1 broad jump. I think he jumped over 10 feet. Now in the NFL Combine, the record is somewhere around 11 feet, 11 or 12 feet. So he is just a freak athlete. He did a box jump, he floated, and he landed like a, they say land like a ninja, land super. Yeah. He was one of the kids. You could overcoach him and make him do something worse because everything he did was perfect. The first time, okay, hold this kettlebell. Okay, squat down and up. All right. Okay, yeah, you got that. Let's move on. Now, there was no coaching really needed. It was unbelievable. And this kid was just unassuming. And again,
that goes back to the genetics, right? Or he's just very aware of his body movements and his actions, probably.
And a good listener. He was coachable. He was committed. I mean, he checked all the boxes. So when he played, I think at the time he played basketball too, and he might have played football, but he was just an all-around athlete. So that kid was going to be successful in the baseball field, right? There are non-athletes that play baseball and succeed, but they're usually the ones that wind up being hurt all the time, right? So the most athletic in other sports wind up being really good baseball players. And that's what the parents need to understand is you need to be multidisciplinary. You need to be a well-rounded athlete first and foremost, and then you need to develop the skill of baseball. So that's kind of what our job is with a lot of the baseball only kids is we're developing their athleticism. So, AMP is their second sport. So if you're not doing something different from baseball, then you're just constantly wearing down those pathways on your joints, on your body, and you're not going to be able to respond when, something goes wrong, when you have to go into a position you're not used to because it becomes robotic. So that's huge. And that's if I that was a snippet in time that I wound up being right, so I've been proved wrong in my career, but I've also with Chris, and I hope he continues. He's actually working with our physical therapist, Jason Roth. He's been working with him for a couple of years. And he still comes back when he's home, and, just a great kid. I just love having these kids in the pipeline. And he's just such a great example of potential and meeting that potential. Because back then I don't know how good he was in 9th or 10th grade. I don't know if he was projectable, but once he got that work ethic and put on like 15, 20 pounds over that time, it all clicked.
No, he's the perfect example because he doesn't look like anything. We know him pretty well, and he's a normal sized kid, but I think
Absolutely.
the parents need to understand it, that you have to have these gifts. And I think everybody in this room has some sort of attribute from God that we excel at our positions. And I even look at myself, like I'm by far the least gifted here, but being my size, but I do have big hands. My wingspan is bigger than my body. Like little things that I'm just really lucky to have. And that definitely helped me.
He can stand up and scratch his knees at the same time.
Yeah.
No, but it's like you don't realize these little things that people have, or that they check 1/3 of that, pie chart for you, right, TJ?
Right. And that's the whole thing. It's going to point you in that direction. If you were 6'4" or 6'8", you'd probably have been playing basketball. It like baseball might not have been it for you, but that's, same thing with Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps was built to be in the water, and that's the extreme example, but there's versions of those examples. That's why certain countries are better at certain Olympic events. Genetics, I think it's something that is passed over because nobody really wants to look at that, but there is a maximum potential that you possess. And we do all we can to maximize that and optimize it. That's our job, is to get you to that point.
TJ, I wanted to ask something before I jump off, and because I think it correlates to what we're trying to get across. Now, you probably don't get enough credit for the type of athlete you were as a younger guy. I know you downplay it, you're self-deprecating, and it's funny, but I do know that AAU basketball team you played on and growing up with my brother was a really good team, and you had to be really good to be on that team. And then you go and play Division I football. Now, if you could look back at TJ Lopez in 10th grade, now with all the knowledge, what was it that you needed training-wise to become a better, or I shouldn't say better athlete, but what could have fulfilled your potential and maybe kept you healthier or gotten you to be a better football player in the long run?
Well, I'd probably be in my 12th year in the NFL. I'd probably be starting for the New York Jets.
Long snapper.
Yeah, right. But, I mean, at the end of the day, like I'm 5'10.5". So what I lacked in genetics, I think I also lacked in a plan. I really didn't have much of a nutrition plan. I really didn't have much of a training plan, and all I focused on was the weight on the bar. So I tried to bench as much, squat as much, deadlift, power lift, or Olympic lift as much as I possibly could. And that actually led me to, creating some deficiencies in my movement where I wasn't focusing on shoulder strength and shoulder health. I wasn't really focusing on, recovery or sleep. So if in high school, I never did a lower body exercise in my life. In high school, I was working out with like the bodybuilders at Gold's Gym, over in West Hempstead. Like we were, I was just listening to whatever the big jacked guy in the corner was telling me to do, and how should I bicep curl so I can get more of a peak on my bicep. Like I was going to the wrong expert. It didn't matter what I looked like. It was all about performance. And like you said, like strength and conditioning coaches, especially in the private sector, was not a thing. There was no such thing as a strength and conditioning facility in 2001. So, when I was in high school, we knew we had to lift, we knew we had to work out, but I bench pressed probably 3 times a week. So when I got to college,
skip leg day.
What was that?
You would skip leg day for another bench day.
I skipped leg day, even though I have a huge ass and calves. Like that's just genetic. I just always had big legs. But, if I actually, worked on core strength, worked on movements, squatted and deadlifted once a week in high school, who knows? I mean, just that alone, just inserting a proper strength and conditioning program, which is really a lot of what we do with our athletes. We implement like a 3-time-a-week strength training program that is pretty basic, but we're customizing it based off of what their abilities are and what their needs are. But if we stay consistent with that for 2 to 3 years, you take that away from the athlete, and they're nowhere near where they would have been, right? So 3 years of strength and conditioning before they get to college is a lifetime of change. And the earlier you commit to that, not too early, but if you're a 9th grader, you should be learning how to strength train. When you're in 10th grade, you should be taking it seriously.
Right. So if this is meaningful to you, and this goes back to you, Brian, right? If this is meaningful to you, if playing the game, whatever sport it is, but, we're baseball guys, but if you want to be a baseball player past high school, or even a really good high school player, and ideally past high school or onto the, I guess the pinnacle of it all and get into the professional ranks and get into the big leagues, you have to strength train, right? I mean, that's the crux of this all, right, Brian? Like and that's why, Jimmy, he started this out, having fun with it, but that's why you're always, I guess, beating us in the head about it.
Yeah, you got to do the things that aren't as easy or fun as, hitting a ball,
Right, and you just have to make sure you're not going too far on the other end of the spectrum. And that's what we talked about before with, like, there still are all these injuries. There's still plenty of guys getting hurt either in the weight room or on the field.
So that's where being with somebody who's knowledgeable, right, comes into play, right? I guess that's
you have to follow. You've got to have a mentor that has been through it. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have been through it yourself, but I went through it myself, right? I went through high school, college. I've trained pro athletes. I've had the experience myself of kind of falling through the cracks of the system and not necessarily doing the right program for me. I was a quarterback, right? So I was a throwing athlete, 5'11" or 5'10" and a half, 210 pounds in college, and I was a quarterback. So I did everything wrong when it comes to preparing myself to throw a football every offseason, and my arm would be hanging by the end of camp. So you get to college August 10th. By August 15th, my arm is like, in what movie is it? The Rookie of the Year, I think it is. When
the kid, he's
throwing, and it's like the electric guitar starts to play, and you hear like that screeching. Like that's how my arm would feel after like 10 days of camp, because we're just throwing, 120 a day, maybe more, 9 balls or fade routes and hitches and throwing as hard as we possibly can. And I was throwing all arm, right? So that's one thing. I was able to do it on, not consistently. I was able to do it once a week in high school and perform and be a gamer. But I wasn't doing what I needed to do between Monday and Saturday, right? Or Sunday and the next game. So there were weeks where I couldn't throw at practice because my arm was hanging in high school. So then I get to college and there's no rest days. There's TJ doesn't have to throw today. He's just going to go through mental reps. That doesn't happen. Right. So my arm would almost fall off by September every year. And then I started to build myself up, but then I would get injured. I'd, take a helmet to the shoulder or get hurt in the weight room, and then I wouldn't be able to perform on the field. So if, like what Mike was saying, if I could have gone back to 10th grade and done it all over again, it would have, who knows, maybe that didn't exist back then, but I would have done a lot of things differently. I would have gotten a better, idea around becoming more efficient as a thrower, which is obviously what we focus on with baseball players. Your skill has to be efficient. Right. If I'm doing everything right in the weight room, but then you pick up a baseball and you're herking, jerking and throwing with your elbow out in front, your head down, and you're putting all this stress on your elbow and shoulder, when I look at that video, I'm like, okay, we got to get you to a pitching coach, because I can do everything right in the weight room, but you don't throw correctly for your body. Somebody needs to teach you how to throw more efficiently. You're putting too much stress on your shoulder, your elbow, your back. There's so many, and like you said, like with these injuries, there's inefficiencies that are building these injuries, right? So it's the biggest predictor to an injury is a previous one, right? So if you hurt your knee, you're probably either going to hurt your knee again, or you're going to hurt your hip or your low back or your right shoulder. Your body is going to find a way to adapt, but then it's going to cause stress in another joint. Right. So that's, efficiency is a big thing. And when you're asking your body to be 110% every single time, you're stressing those joints more and more and more every single time. So, that the state of baseball today, I think we have to be more specific, and we've got to make sure that we're not overdoing certain things and building these engines in a certain way. And then their sport is demanding a whole nother set of demands.
Right. That's great. No, I tell you what, man, this has been educational for us, I think. I think it's fair to say we all probably got a ton of, in a short time here, a ton of, I guess, insight into your world and what it means to be a trained athlete, and especially, the differences from our era to today's era, and I hope the people that are listening out there, they're taking this for what it's worth, because there's a lot of value in in investing into yourself from a strength and conditioning process, and you got the sports specific stuff, or we got the sports training, but when you talk about getting stronger for competition, that's a different dynamic. And guys like yourself, TJ, obviously, you're worth your weight in gold, So thanks for sharing your knowledge with us, man. And thanks for, let's get this out to our audience, and, really appreciate your time on this. And I got 3 things though, before we let you go. All right.
Cool.
First thing, Chris, I think it's obviously we have to get him back on too.
No, we do. You're right. You know what, Jim? You're right. Because
there's a lot of layers to this stuff. So we'd like to have you on again too.
For sure.
Yeah, and after you answer the 3 things, let the audience know how to get in touch with you.
Well, that was one of them. So
okay,
we'll make sure to cover that. So,
all right, nice.
So the first thing is, God, now I forgot what all 3 were.
Oh, boy.
He was rolling.
So the first thing is, now I'm back on track. First thing is, we'd love for you to speak to our guys, our group one day, if that's at all possible.
Absolutely.
And set that up. We could talk about that off camera and get that set up. Secondly, is CC making a comeback?
No.
Okay.
All
right. He's in too good a shape.
Exactly. So he's got different goals, right? And he pretty much, I think quarantine was the best thing for him. To be honest, one of the funny stories is one year, I think it was 2011 or 2012. He was recovering from one of the surgeries, and he didn't leave his house because his house is so big and it has so many amenities. He's got a full service barbershop, a movie theater, an indoor basketball court, a full arcade, like 50 TVs, he's got a chef. He's got everything you possibly think of. He didn't leave his house for like 25 straight days. And this was just a regular off season. Like, he hates the colds. He's from Vallejo, California, which is beautiful. It's in the Bay Area. And every off season, he hated just getting into his car because he didn't like putting on anything other than shorts. So like this one day, we're in the gym, and he looks over to me and goes, "Yo, I haven't been out of my house in 3 weeks." What? So he's loving quarantine, and he's just committed to the training, and it's a totally different focus.
All right, so we're not going to see him back.
I want some more. I need some more. I love mansions. I need some more info on the.
That's
mansion.
what we got to have. Well, we got to have. We got to have him back on.
Maybe we got to get CC on.
Wait, yeah, you should.
Oh man.
Well, right now there's nothing going on, so. He might.
Well, listen,
he's got a good podcast himself.
Yeah,
he's going to be a star, man.
Yeah.
Yes. He's doing exactly what he should be doing right now. We talked about this. It's one of those things that pops up all the time. Even like 6-7 years ago, people were talking about his retirement, and he always said that he wanted to get into commentating afterward, but he didn't want to wear a suit. So he's like, these idiots look so dumb wearing a suit or a polo. He's like, the worst thing is he tried to make me wear a polo. So the podcast is just a perfect thing for him.
It's him and Ryan Rucco, right?
Him and Ryan Rucco, yep. And
he's a star too, in the making.
All that, and he's like Rucco's kind of like, he's got a lot of like Long Island connections, a lot of local connections. But yeah, man, he's doing. I mean, like the podcast, I listen to it and I feel like I'm hanging out with him. Like, that is who he is.
Right.
So it's like it's the perfect setting for him. And the stories and the jokes and just ragging on each other. That's what I miss because I'm not around him all the time. That's like. We would be training in that training facility in New Jersey, and the owner would come up to me and be like, what the hell are you guys doing? All I see is you guys giggling and laughing, talking about like the new Netflix show or whatever reality television. Like, he watches, if there's a show, he watches it like before it's even humanly possible to watch every episode. So like when whatever, like Black Mirror came on, he would watch every episode, and then we would have to talk about it. So I'd have to like catch up to him. I'd be up late at night watching shows and be like, just so we could talk about it. But yeah, man. I mean, he's just like down to earth dude, and
that's great.
Yeah, it was a great part of my career, and we're definitely keeping in touch and keeping that friendship going. But everybody's in quarantine. He's gonna be making it out to Long Island. He said, he's got a son now. Who is, I believe he is now a sophomore at Bergen Catholic. So he's going into his junior year, big year. And I've been, helping him.
Is he a football player?
No, he's a baseball player.
Okay, good. Because Bergen Catholic's a big football program, right?
They are, yes. He played basketball. I think he still plays basketball, but baseball is a sport. He's like just about 6'6" now.
Wow.
Like he's pushing. He might be taller than CC because actually CC's wife, CC's brother-in-law is like 6'5" or 6'6". So he's got the genetics.
Right.
That box is checked for him.
Right.
So another just great kid. I mean, all 4 of his kids are just unbelievable kids. I mean, they just did an unbelievable job bringing those kids up. So respectful, and you would never know it, when you meet the kid. But he's going to be a stud, and
New York Tech.
Keep in touch. He's looking at like USC, UCLA, maybe.
Yeah, that's a downgrade in staff.
Who's his sidekick, CC? I was at the winter meetings. I was hanging out with him. I forget the guy's name.
Who?
CC's got a sidekick that's always around him.
Oh, Skip.
Skip.
Yeah, Mike,
Good guy.
So Skippy was the ball boy down the third baseline, and Mel Cott, the announcer for the Yankees, just like gave him the nickname Skippy because he would make these like crazy plays on like in the 90s, and he one day when like before CC got traded to the Yankees, he was like, hey man, I want to when you get traded to New York, I want to become your personal assistant. And he's like, yeah, sure, why not? And literally the day CC's moving into his house, Skip just shows up on his front door. And he's like, what are you here for? He's like, I'm reporting for duty. Like,
right. Remember our agreement?
Like, okay.
Wow,
So
that's sick.
That just became his thing. And he just he left the Yankees. He became CC's personal assistant. He's still there today. And yeah, man, we became
talk
really
about being committed.
Yeah. We had one off season where we used to go out to California. We hung out. We came real close out in Vallejo. Actually, we were staying in Napa, and man, we got some stories from that first trip. Like we became it was like the movie Step Brothers. Like the first night, we're like not sure about each other. Like he's kind of like treating me like he's my boss. He's like telling me when to report to things, and I'm like, I look at him like sideways. I'm like, okay. So then, like the first night, I'm like, I got nothing to do. This is the first time I'm traveling with a pro athlete. Like I train him for an hour, and then we got nothing else to do the rest of the day. I'm like, so I go to school. I'm like, hey man, what are you doing tonight? You want to go out, do something? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, you want to go get dinner, go get a drink? And he's like, yeah, let's go. And then we we become best friends. Like,
right. Did we just become friends?
Yeah, we just become best friends. Yeah. So I mean, like anybody that's around, like the Sabathias, and like Amber is she's like she like directs the camp, right? So anybody that's in that group, in that family, is vetted by Amber first and foremost. And including myself, including the chef, everybody. And it's just like, I've met so many great people, CC's family, his mother, his cousins, they're just really great down to earth.
That's some experience. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. I got some stories. So we got to do it.
Now, so the last thing, obviously, what Brian mentioned, go ahead and tell our audience, how do they get in touch with AMP? How do they get in touch with TJ Lopez and his staff? And, how do they get in the mix? Let them know.
So our website is ampathletes.com, plural. So ampathletes.com. So you could reach out to us there. It's train@ampathletes is our email. So make it simple. And I would say probably the biggest thing right now is Instagram. So it's amp_athlete is our Instagram handle. I'm Coach TJ Lopez on Instagram. And if you want to direct message us there, those are probably the best ways to get a hold of us. We use text messaging, all that, 516-802-0152. But yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you guys' platform and having me on. I've been following what you've been doing. I think it's great. I think the insight for these young athletes is so huge, especially, the younger ones that are trying to come up, and those, just the locker room stories and the things that they can, look to and gain some insight on what they should be focusing on. And, during this, I don't know when this is going to be posted. I'm sure we're still going to be in some sort of quarantine or just getting out of it. But at the end of the day, the things that you guys need to focus on this is the year of development. This is not going to be the year of competition for high school and younger athletes. And it really shouldn't. I think that there's got to be a stance, especially in Little League, to not just step on the mound and start playing right away.
Yeah, man. Especially with these pitchers.
Right. So we're theming 2020 to 2021 as the year of development for high school, college, and the younger athletes. So, just focus on that. Focus on developing your athleticism, your approach to the game, your approach to your building your body, your mindset, your nutrition, your recovery. Focus on all the off the field stuff because you have to, right? You're forced into doing it. Don't allow yourself to just sleep until noon every day and play video games till 3 a.m. because those guys, they're the ones that are going to get passed up. In a year from now, when we're stepping back on the field, we're going to know who played video games for 12 months and who busted their ass. And I'm getting reports from our athletes. We've been doing online training for the last 3 months, and the athletes that have stuck with it, I'm getting reports from our parents like, he's an animal. He's a beast. Like, it's unbelievable how much stronger and how much better they're looking right now just by being doing the basics. They don't have all the equipment that we have in the gym. We've given them like we had to give Sean Lane like almost all of our weight because he still wanted to deadlift heavy.
He's an animal.
They're sending us videos. They're still getting the programming. Obviously, a lot more body weight stuff, lighter weights, but they're staying consistent. You have to have that consistency in your life, and now's the time more than ever to lock that in so that when you get back to playing, now the old saying, you don't have to get ready if all you have to do is stay ready, right? So if you're already ready, you got to stay ready. But if you have to like rush to get ready before next season, what was your excuse?
Right.
You had 18 months.
Right.
So
lost opportunity.
Let's lock it in. If you're listening to this right now and you're not locked in off the field and you're just, messing around and kind of playing here and there, you still have to work on your skill. You still got to get out there on the field, but you should be doing everything in your power to get the information and to whether you're doing it on your own, you're finding somebody like me, reach out and we'll point you in the right direction. And hopefully you're local and you can train with us. We're actually working on making our online platform more readily available for anybody that doesn't live in our region. So, we're going to have more online training options. That's pretty much what my team and myself are working on is the accountability side of things, staying in touch with our clients when they're not inside the gym. And then also the programming when they're not with us, because now we're forced into it. But it's going to be something that we continue, and we're going to learn a lot from it. And I think it's going to build even deeper connections with our clients, because now we can help them more with not just the strength training. We already do work with nutrition and supplementation, but now we're giving them like tips on how to get better sleep, how to structure your day better to get more work done, how to clear your mind, how to cook breakfast. Like these are little things, life lessons and life skills that you got to develop. The earlier you do them, the better off you're going to be in college and hopefully at the next level after that.
Amen, man. Jim, you got anything?
Now I know why I hear great things.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jimmy. I really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, it was awesome that you brought that up because, I've been hearing over the last couple of days, professional teams talking about just guys have this opportunity to come back bigger and stronger. It's the longest off season ever. But yes, it's going to be interesting because there's going to be guys that
there will be
going to come back out of shape and they're going to be out of the game.
Yeah, people are going to get exposed. When the tide rolls out, you're going to see who's wearing a bathing suit and who's there standing there naked with their tubby little body. Yeah. Because, it's just it's really easy to slip into stay up till 3 a.m, sleep till noon, and just rinse and repeat. Every day becomes the same day. So it's the easiest thing to fall into that, but it's also simple to get back on track. We all have a calendar app. We all have an alarm on our phone that can kind of those little nudges. And then for us, we're texting our clients. We know where they are. So we have a private Instagram group. We text them, we follow up, we call them, we email them. So, if they're not getting back to us in a week, we reach out, say, hey, what's going on? Let's get back on track. So it's all about consistency and mindset. And then everything else kind of falls into place after that.
Awesome. Good. Great stuff.
All right. Well, hey, thanks again, TJ. Really do appreciate you. Thanks to our audience out there for tuning in and listening again. And, please make sure to go to iTunes or Podbean or Spotify, hit the subscribe button. You can also check us out on YouTube. Don't be afraid to hit the subscribe button there as well. Leave a comment. Love to hear about you. Drop a like. And until next time, Wild Pitch Podcast.